Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat, and in this blog video I want to talk about a plugin which could be a bit of a game changer when it comes to retopology and even model creation actually. This plugin isn't free, it's paid for. I will be putting up a link in the description of this video to where you can go grab it. They've got several different options. You can just buy it outright, or there's a subscription model as well. But it's made by a company called Exoside. At exoside.com, and the plugin itself is called Quad Remesher. So once you've grabbed it, download it. I think they offer a trial as well actually, so you can go grab it and test it out. But once you've installed it, you'll find it in your extensions here, Quad Remesher, and I've just made a button for it. I've just put it in my UI there. Okay, so you're probably wondering what it does and why you're staring at this horrible dirty mesh, and that's because Quad Remesher basically remeshes things and makes them quads. And it does a really good job at doing it as well. So not only can this clean up messy meshes, but it can also help you create meshes as well and keep it all quads. Now, for the uninitiated out there, you may be thinking, well, why do quads matter? And there's several reasons. If you've got a mesh like this, it's probably not going to deform very well, and you're going to get some aberrations on the surface, especially when it comes to the Phong shading and that kind of thing. So quads are good for deformation, but also edge selection and edge flow in general really. I mean, if I go to my move tool and the edge tool here, and then double click on one of these, I'm not going to get a loop as I expect, because it doesn't know where to go. It immediately hits this complex pole here, whereas with quads it knows, it follows the rule of opposite edges, and it can go straight through the middle because there's 4 edges connecting to a point. But in this case that can't happen, and to make a selection, if I wanted to make a selection across this thing, it's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass. I'll try to do a path select there, and it did this. So you can see how when it comes to loop selections and edge flow, it's a real problem. Anyway, so first things first, I just want to go over what the plugin does and some of its settings, and then we'll go through how we can use it to create complex organic meshes really easily. I'm going to hit the Quad Remesh button up here. It opens this dialog, and I'm just going to go through what each thing in the dialog does. So first of all, we've got our target quad count, and it's currently set to 5,000, and I'm just going to hit the remesh it button. So I've got this dirty mesh selected, and you do need a mesh selected, obviously, and then you can hit the remesh button. So let's just do that. And there you go. Our mesh is now being remeshed with perfect quads. So, you know, that really took the headache out of, you know, making sure that was nice. Now, you look at this and go, well, there might be too many quads there, and this is what the rest of this dialog does. We can really control how this object is remeshed. I actually created this object myself and made it horrible and messy on purpose just to show you how this plugin handles. So the target quad count, we had it at 5,000, so let's drop it down to something super low, maybe not too low, maybe 250, something like that. 250, there we go, and remesh it. There we go. So not bad at all. We can see that there's some problems, like this is quite a sharp line here, and we'll talk about how we can sort that kind of thing out. Let's bring it back down even lower, to maybe 100 as well. Control Z to go back and do it at 100, and then we can see that we're not getting as good as a description of what our original mesh was, because there's too few polys. So we can actually adapt the size of our polys. In fact, you can see it already happening here. You can see these polys are this big here, and here where there's more detail, they actually get smaller and closer together, higher resolution if you like. And this is to do with this adaptive size here. It's currently set to 50% by default. So let's drop this down to 0. Let's Control Z as well to go our original mesh and remesh it. So at 0%, there's no adaptive quad sizing being done, and that's why all the quad sizes are the same, because its priority is trying to maintain a uniform quad size when this adaptive size is down at 0. But you can also see we've lost a lot of detail there. So let's put this all the way up to 100%. Let's go back again and then remesh. And now you can see where it's detecting a angle. I assume that's how it's doing it. Maybe normal angle, something like that. It's adding smaller polygons closer together to describe this curve better. So as you can see right up here, doesn't need a lot of detail to describe this flat area, and it's only when it starts getting here and curving upwards that it starts adding more adaptive sized polys. So that's really, really useful. So that's the adaptive size. Let's reset our options. This will reset everything back to the beginning and put this back to 100 again, and we'll go back. So we've got our horrible dirty mesh again. Okay, next we've got adaptive quad count. So you may be thinking, well, we've already set what the quad count should be up here, which is 100. This adaptive quad count doesn't really ignore this. It still tries to keep this around the same number, but this overrides it. It becomes the priority when this is checked on. Let's put the adaptive size all the way down to 0 and remesh it just to give us an idea of what we were getting before. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So we'll undo that and check on adaptive quad count, and we'll remesh it again. Now, not much has changed, and that's because this kind of works in conjunction with the adaptive size slightly. So let's go back, put this back up to 50% and remesh it. Now we can actually see what the quad count here. It's 192. Okay, so let's go back, turn that off and remesh it again. And this one's 105. So you can see that with the adaptive quad count, it will look at this and determine whether it needs more or less to describe the object in terms of poly count. It will not ignore this, but it'll it takes some liberties with that count. So again, if I click that on and do this, we've got 192 polys, and without that we had around 100. But it's a much better description of what's going on. Okay, let's go back and turn this off, and this is back at 50% again. We've also got use vertex color. Notice that it's in this box here that describes quad sizing, and we can actually use vertex painting to decide what the density of quads are. So let's turn this on, and this value goes from 0.26, which is sort of low. I think 1 is actually neutral. Yeah, it is. And a maximum of 4. So I'm going to put it right up to 4 so we can see what's going on. And I'm going to press this P button here. And what it does is it creates a vertex map, and it colours the entire thing this white colour. And if we double click on our tag here, we can see that when this is set to 4 and we hit the P button, this colour is set to red. So this colour here represents this value of 4, like the highest density, if you like. So what I'm going to do is just paint on some colour. I might do this as well. There we go. Looks like the England flag, doesn't it? And then I'm just going to remesh. And as you can see, the density of the quads are now gathered around where I painted. You can also paint negatively as well. So if we go back and I set this to 1 again and hit the paint button, you can see that the colour's now white, and I can now paint this back to neutral. And again, if I remesh it, it would just be it will kind of look like it would if I hadn't painted a vertex, because it's completely neutral. But we can go the other direction, press P, and now you notice the colour's blue, and we can actually paint. Let's paint up here, and this is like a negative value. Well, not a negative value, but it's basically saying that we want the density to be lower than 1. And if I remesh this now, we can see that this has got all the description in terms of poly resolution, that it had a level of 1, and this has got way less at the top. So you can really control how this gets remeshed using these quad sizing tools up here. So I'm just going to turn this back off, set this back to 1. I don't need to repaint the vertex map because I can just delete it. And, oh sorry, I should have undone first. There we go. So let's delete our vertex map. And we're back to where we were. And if I remesh it now, we should just get a normal interpretation without any nudging. Okay, next we move on to edge loop control. Say you wanted to remesh this, but you didn't want it in a regular grid. You kind of wanted to guide the flow of polygons. You can use these methods to do that. So our first method is use materials. Now, I've not had any luck with this, so it appears that it's not working the way that I'd expect it to. But there is no documentation out at the moment specifically for Cinema 4D, so I may not be using it correctly, but what's meant to be happening is the Quad Remesher plugin looks at the bounds of materials and then determines polygon flow based on those bounds. So let's turn this off and just turn on use materials. I'm going to make a material, and I don't think I need to do anything with it. I don't think the color really matters because it's just looking at the boundaries of materials. So if I just create this red material here, make a polygon selection, let's make this nice and big, so maybe something like this. Oh, we can see that we got flip normals, or I'm looking at the back side of it, so let's reverse those. There we go. So if I select a load of polys down here, in fact, let's have this sprawl up the middle, and then we can paint this in, and then we can apply this to this section. What should happen is it looks at the boundary of this material, which is here, and then try and arrange the polygon flow around that. So let's hit remesh. And there's our result. Not much different from normal. It certainly didn't have an effect on the flow of polygons, that material boundary. So I'm not sure that that's working correctly, but like I said, when the documentation comes out for Cinema 4D, I'll have a look at it. I may be using it wrong, I'm not sure. So we'll leave that for now. Okay, so I've deleted the material from our scene and the polygon selection on my object and the material tag up there as well. So we're back to where we were. So let's turn use materials off and have a look at the next setting, which is use normal splitting / breaking. So let's turn that on. Now, to actually make a selection through this mess is a right pain because, like I said, edge flow isn't good. It's a bit of a pain. So I actually prepared a path selection beforehand using a selection tag, and it's this here, and you can see my path. So if I was to have this selected and remesh, not much is going to happen because it doesn't actually work on edge selection. You've got to use normal splitting or breaking. So let's go back one. With my path selected, what I need to do is right click and go to break Phong shading. Okay, so now this is broken, and if I click off like this, I can actually check and say select broken Phong edges, and it will select this path. So now my edge flow will be based on this normal breaking. So let's remesh and see what happens. Now you can actually see that this is slightly deviated, and it might be even more apparent if I make the target quad count a lot higher. So let's make this 1500 and then remesh. And you can see that that normal breaking has definitely had an effect on the flow of how this is being remeshed. Now that could be super helpful if you're wanting your flow to go around a specific part of the mesh in a very specific way. This can be really, really good. So that's what this does. Let's back up again, turn this off. And we've got this detect hard edge by angle. Now this is on by default, and there's a good reason for that. In fact, let's create another object. Let's just grab a cylinder, and we'll pull this up, pull it across. Now, if I was to turn detect hard edges by angle off and remesh this, you're not going to see much difference. maybe a little bit on the edge here. We've got this little bit of dodginess going on here, and that's because our poly count is so high. So let's drop this back down again to 100 and remesh it again. And now you can see the problem that we're facing. We've got this, it doesn't really know how to describe this sort of edge here, but with detect hard edges on, if I back up again and remesh this again, we can see we've got a much sharper, cleaner edge. So it's evaluated the angle of our object and translated that through to the remeshed version. It should be obvious why this is on by default, because it's automatic and it does its job. Okay, so we can get rid of this cylinder now. You'll notice that the input is hidden as well, which I'll get down to in a minute. It's this checkbox. So if I choose this dirty mesh and remesh, you'll see that in our object manager the original mesh is hidden, and then our retopo mesh is the one that's shown. If I back up and uncheck this, it won't hide our input object. They'll both be visible and laid on top of each other like this. I tend to think hiding the original object's a good idea. So there we go. Okay, symmetry. This is a good one. Let's crank this up to say 250. And we'll put our adaptive size up so we get some more detail here. And we'll also put the adaptive quad count on as well. And we'll remesh. Okay, so that's our input. And it seems that we're getting a little bit of wobbling here. And that could be because we've still got this broken Phong edge. So now I've got it selected, I can say unbreak Phong shading, and now when I select broken Phong edge, it's not selected any longer and should have no impact on the remeshing. So let's do this again. There we go. Still got a bit of dodginess going on over here. It may be because of the nature of our input mesh, I'm not sure, but this will actually show what I'm about to go over. So we have these symmetry checkboxes here. If I remesh this wobble that we've got over here, we may want to make sure that that's included over the other side, so we've got a symmetrical shape. So let's turn symmetry on, so both sides of this mesh mirror each other, they're exactly the same. So first of all, we've got to figure out what direction. Well, if you look at the gimbal thing at the bottom here, it's the X direction, this direction. So let's put symmetry on in the X, undo, and then we'll remesh our object. Now we can see that both sides of this mesh mirror each other. I'm going to turn this adaptive size down to 50. We can also mirror in the Z direction, in the X direction. The Y direction may not make sense for this object, but let's have a look. No, it's mirrored it along the middle axis of the object, but now it doesn't really look like our original object. You might have a use for that, I'm not sure, but in this instance it's not a very good way to describe our model. Z, that's front and back. Let's try that. Yes, and it's going to try and mirror it on a mirror plane that's going through the middle of our object, so that's going to be no good either. So really, it'll be the X that we want to make sure that is symmetrical, and I think we've got a pretty good result there. Okay, so that's the settings. Let's go through talking about something that doesn't involve this mesh at all. Let's get rid of these completely and talk about model creation. So let's get rid of both of these and create a box, and we'll make sure that it's sat on the floor. And now we're going to start creating something using the Boolean. Now with modeling, it's a bit of a no-no to use the Boolean. It usually leaves you with a lot of n-gons or a messy mesh, triangles all over the place, but that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's grab a bool object. We're going to put our main cube in there, and then we're going to use other shapes to cut out or make a union with this object. So we've got another cube, and we're just going to shrink that down, and we'll pull this up, and let's put it at the back here, something like that. Excellent. Okay, so let's lob this in our bool as well and change the order so it's a cut out like this. And in this case, I'm actually going to select our Boolean object, and instead of A subtract B, I'm going to make a union. So it's like this. Now, normally with a Boolean object, we can just make this editable by hitting C. And this is the result that we get. If we choose our object, you can see that it's actually two different objects. We've got this cube and this cube. And that's because in the Boolean object, I didn't check something. So let's back up. And we have this create single object checkbox, which I'm going to check there. We've also got this hide new edges. So if I uncheck this, you can see that how this new object is going to be formed when it's made editable. Now in this case, this is actually perfect because everything is quads. This is a quad, so's this, so's this, so are these. Excellent. But when things get a bit more complicated, it's not going to be a quad. I'm going to leave hide new edges off for the time being, and I'm going to create a null, and I'm going to make this a child of the Boolean object and put our cutout object in there. Our union object. So we've got exactly what we did before, but now we can start putting more objects in this null. And it's because with the bool, you can only have two objects in it. But now I've got a null. This is kind of connects anything in it together. So let's create a more complex model by creating a sphere, shrinking this down, and moving this around here. And then we'll put this sphere in with our cube. And now we can see that the union with this sphere is a lot more complicated, and it's not really giving us this nice clean quads. We've now got n-gons, we've got triangles. In fact, yeah, it's all triangles. There's no n-gons. We've got this problem area here. I don't know what's going on there. Oh yeah, that is a big problem. And it's because of the point on the sphere. So you're going to get a really messy mesh there. And in fact, let's just test that theory by selecting our Boolean and hitting C. And yes, you can see we're getting a try here as well. And yeah, so let's undo that. You could get around this by hiding the new edges, but those underlying triangles that you see when we've got this ticked off are still there. So if we hide the edges and then make this editable, you'll be looking at this shape, which looks a lot cleaner. And it's because this is one big n-gon here. And we can actually visualize what's really going on by going to the filter and go to show n-gon lines. And it's exactly as it was before when we were not hiding the new edges. So obviously that's not going to be good either. Take the n-gon lines off. In fact, we'll go back to our Boolean object. Now this is where the Quad Remesher comes in, because we can actually just remesh this bool. Instead of making it editable and then trying to sort it out after, we can actually just run the Quad Remesher on this Boolean object. So I'm going to put this count up to 1,000 just to make it a bit more. We can take this off as well. We'll leave detect hard edges by angle off on. And yeah, I think we'll just keep everything as it is for the moment. Adaptive quad size we'll leave on as well. Now that's done a pretty good job, really. That's not bad at all. We've got edge flow. Everything here is quads. But we've got another issue actually here. If we look at this and then go back one, you can see that the resolution of our sphere isn't very high, so it really doesn't describe this curve very well. In fact, if I put the target quad count up to 5,000, you'll be able to see what I'm on about. It tries to retain a lot of the aspects of this sphere. In fact, there's a good example. It's tried to keep that straight line that was on the sphere here. If we flip back and forth, you can see it there. So what you do to address this is actually make your sphere much higher resolution in terms of its poly count, and then we've got a much better description of this curve. Now you might think that's a lot of polys, but it really doesn't matter because it's going to get changed anyway by the remesher. And if we run this again, we can see that now the description, oh, sorry, I had the sphere selected then when I hit the remesh button. So let's back up and actually make sure our ball is selected and then remesh. Now you can see that we've got a much better description of this curve. And it's great. It's all quads. This edge flow is absolutely brilliant. Great stuff. Now you might be thinking, well, that's a lot of polys there. So you might want to drop your count down. So let's drop this down to 1,000. And the adaptive size is 50. Let's crank this up to 100% and turn off adaptive quad count. We can really start controlling the amount of quads in our model. Now still, that's a pretty good description of our original mesh, which was a Boolean. That's great. And it can get even more complex than this. So if we close up our Boolean and actually create another Boolean, now we can put our original Boolean inside it, and instead of doing a union, so let's select our new bool and say create single object, and then we can use another shape to actually cut out. So let's grab a cylinder and bring it up here. Let's go to object mode as well. There we go. And shrink that down some and really jab that in there. And we'll put that in our new Boolean. And you can see that that's cut this out of our new shape. So let's just check both the Booleans. Yep, that's fine. And so's that. So let's try and remesh this. And there we go. All quads. Perfect. And just to make sure, if we go inside the model, you might be thinking, is it made, you know, manifold, non-manifold edges or anything like that? Nope, it's absolutely perfect if we go inside the model. So that's how you can actually model with the Boolean object and get a acceptable mesh out the other side of it as well. In fact, to show this off with deformation a little bit, if I undo with this Boolean object and actually just hit C, so this creates this, and then put a deformer underneath it. So let's go in here, let's put a twist underneath that, and then actually bend this. You can see all kinds of problems are happening there. Obviously we've got enough information on our sphere, but on the main box we really haven't, and even though this twist is a nice curve, that's not translated over to this edge because there's only one edge. There's not enough resolution in it. So let's back up. And instead of making our bool editable, remesh it. And then we'll apply the same twist to this mesh. Oh. And do the same thing. Much better. This edge is able to describe this curve because there's more resolution in it. And it's much better. Okay, let's move on from the bool then. Let's get rid of this stuff. Let's take a look at other generators because it'd be interesting to see if this actually handles other generators. So will it work on extrudes and lathes and all of that? I don't know. I haven't tested a lot of this out, but let's get a star. Let's get an extrude as well and whack that in there. And let's have a look. Let's grab this and extrude it along this direction on the Z direction, and we've got our extrude selected. Well, it seems to have worked on that, and it hasn't broken it up or anything like that. It seems to have worked on the extrude as a generator, so that's good news for us. Like I said, this is my first time looking at this. I don't want to spend too long going through a loft. That would be an interesting one because it's a little bit more complicated. So let's grab a circle and put that in the loft. Let's also grab a star and we'll put that in the loft as well. And let's also grab a flower And we'll put that in the loft. Now that's a little strange, isn't it? What have I... Okay. Go this way. Alright. Choose the loft and remesh. Yeah, it seems to recognise that as well. So, yeah, have a look at that, guys. It obviously looks like it's going to be pretty powerful when it comes to retopologizing and stuff. Oh, actually, one more thing, actually. Let me pull up something. Okay, I've got a model here of an astronaut, and it's pretty messy, to be honest. Let's have a look at the mesh. Look at that. So I just wanted to see what kind of job it would do on an object like this. So I'm actually just going to select the suit of the guy, and I'm going to go back to our clean scene and paste this in here. I just want to isolate it without any of the other stuff. In fact, let's get rid of the suit material. We don't need any of this stuff or this. We just need the mesh itself, so that's fine. And you know, that's pretty heavy mesh. Just go back to our spaceman scene and close this. So yeah, we've got a pretty heavy mesh here, and you know, it's a bit all over the place as well, to be honest. And that is probably because this is a scan, if I had to guess. We got some problems with it under the arm here. We've got a bit of a hole there and it's a bit of a mess. So I should imagine that will be translated across into our remesh as well. But let's have a look at how well this can handle. In fact, I'm just going to reset everything to its regular settings and just run this and see how well it does. Okay, it's taken a little bit longer than our other meshes, so I might actually fast forward this part here. Okay, so there's our result, and I've got to be honest, I'm quite impressed really. It's all quads. It's managed to hold the shape. We've got a little bit of an issue back here, but it'd be interesting. In fact, let's back up, and yeah, we can actually see there was an issue on the original mesh, so it's actually just sort of mimicking that almost a little bit. Not quite, but we've got an issue going on here as well. But again, maybe there's not enough polys, or maybe I need to tweak the settings. So let's give that a go. Let's back up one. Let's make the adaptive size a little bit better, so it gives it a bit more leeway when it needs it. And we'll adapt the quad count as well, so if it needs extra quads anywhere, it can go above this number. Apart from that, I think that's about it. Right, there we go. It's obviously given itself more quads where needed. That edge might need a bit of a bevel because it's a bit sharp, but at least the edge flow is so good now that we've got no problems if we wanted to put a bevel on that edge. There's no problems whatsoever because it's all quads, and the flow goes round the edge of that shape. Same up here. We've got a little bit of an issue there. I'd probably that'll take 5 seconds to go in and sort that point out. That'll be fine. So for the large part, it's done a really, really good job. So I'm actually quite impressed with this plugin and almost resent it a little bit because I've done a lot of retopology and I've had to learn how to retopologize in a way that makes sense. And I usually go through a model with the pen tool and the shrink wrap. And I should imagine that this isn't going to be a fix-all solution, but it will certainly get you most of the way there, and then you can clean it up. So yeah, please go have a look at this Quad Remesher plugin by Exoside, and I'll put a link in the description. Okay, cheers for listening, guys. Bye. For my viewers on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified of new tutorials. You can check out content at digitalmeat.uk, where you can filter my tutorials by category and vote in the poll for upcoming tutorials. You can also follow me on social media, links in the description and the footer of my website. If you'd like to help support Digital Meat, this can be done via Patreon or the support page on the website. But if you want to help Digital Meat keep going and bag yourself some extra in-depth tutorial content, the Prime membership is available for purchase in the store. This will grant you access to the Prime membership area of the website. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.